where we'll be talking about managing ego. Actually, that's a misnomer, isn't it? Because ego is the very thing that must manage itself. It's almost like asking a criminal to catch itself. So, because we have a limitation in the language that we can use in communications, for lack of a better structure, we're called this managing ego. But I want you to remember that by managing ego, the mystics are talking about becoming egoless. So it's not so much having a big ego managing a little ego, in as much as it is to become completely egoless. And actually, when we begin to discuss this topic of ego and all of its ramifications, we have entered into the very heart of mysticism, to the very core. The attainment of a state of called egolessness is the aim and objective that underlies the ambitions of all spiritual traditions. So we will be dealing now and then with the nucleus of all that is meant when we talk about meditation, when we talk about spiritual development, so forth and so on. And as a result of that, it will necessarily cause us to revisit a lot of old themes, but in a very different light. So in some respect, this is a kind of summary series in the sense that it will cause us to revisit a host of prior topics and themes that we have been discussing throughout all of the last workshops, nay, throughout all of the last 10 or 15 years. This really is the core of the whole problem. It'll be a little difficult to talk about this subject simply because there are dimensions that are wordless. There are egolessness is not something that you can really talk about. It doesn't lend itself to any kind of linguistic captivity. It's very hard to reduce that experience into words. Yet we've had a little luck in the past, and we will simply pray and hope that we remain fortunate enough to try to get some insights into this whole business about ego. You have to begin to come to a different understanding of what is meant by the word ego. Normally when we talk about egotism, what is it that we're referring to? When we say that somebody's got a big ego or ego tripping or very egotistical, what is the normal connotation on that word ego as we use it, the colloquial use of the word? Very self-centered. Some other adjectives would be kind of full of themselves along with something else, right? Right? Full of themselves, arrogant, so forth, so on. Right? Yet these are really byproducts of ego. They are not ego proper. These are the derivatives of the state called ego. Well, if egotism is not simply a reference to a person's arrogance, their self-centeredness, their being full of pomposity, and they're very pompous and all these other things. If egotism is not that, and that's bad enough, I'm saying egotism is worse than that. It is worse than being arrogant. It is worse than being pompous. It is worse than being simply self-centered. It's worse than being a megalomaniac. It's worse than all of those things. Because it is the mother of all of those things. It gives birth to all of those negative, repulsive traits that we find in each other. So it behooves us, therefore, to go deep into this subject. The nature and the anatomy of ego, its origin, its genesis. And remember, we will be going into an area that will be painful for some of us. Because in traversing this path leading towards the origin of our egos, we will be coming across many things that in ourselves that we may not have been aware of. We will be setting out for all those who have eyes to see certain dimensions in ourselves that is not particularly flattering. So it'll be a little difficult. But Pam, you prepared your discourse for today before I go too forth? Good. Yes. Well, you just come and you freestyle. So Pam will salvage any damage that I do, huh? All right then. Yes?
I was going to say one thing. You had touched on this before in the anger seminar, and from what I can remember, you were saying that the ego is really those first feelings of separateness from God. People have like isolated themselves in their mind, or even nominated themselves as God, and then their whole life proceeds from that assumption.
Yes. Already you have started the stuff. You couldn't wait.
Well, you put that little bit out before.
Yes. Absolutely right. That is a very good working definition that we would have for egotism. As we go into this, I want to pause just for a moment and thank Sarah and Pamela and Dorothy and everyone else who has been instrumental in the past as well as the present in setting up these workshops. They have picked beautiful topics. They have worded them very beautifully, and we are all very grateful to you for creating an occasion for us to get together. Satsang is such a delight for me. I don't know how you guys made it. I had a hard time because absolutely I missed you all. But we want to thank you. I wanted to get that out this time because usually I forget about it and bring it in on the end, but this time we're going to do first things first. So we want to thank you very much for putting it together. Now, Emma, let us begin. Let us begin first with a definition of ego. Ego is that mind process, as the flyer says, that separates man's consciousness from God's consciousness. Ego is the self-experience of being separate, isolated, individuated from that which is the source of our being. It is a kind of spiritual amnesia, if you will. And how did it begin? Much has to be understood to appreciate that predicament. In the beginning, or before the beginning, because we really can't even talk about time, because there was no time at that point, when all that is simply was in a state of absolute total oneness. You will find that the theme that runs through all of the great traditions, whether it is Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, any of the great traditions, the common thread that runs through all of them that there is only one God. There's only one being, actually. One being. There's only one consciousness. And the whole objective of all of the great traditions is to bring its adherents into the realization and the experience of this oneness. And some will approach it this way, some will approach it that way, but they all are approaching the same fundamental goal, and that is the rediscovery, if you will, the recapturing of the experience of oneness. So God, Allah, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't really matter. That which is the ground of existence prior to manifestation existed in an unmanifest, undifferentiated state with no form, no distinction. The words of the mystics have said there was nothing. Now it's interesting. And remember, by nothing they don't mean nothing. Zero. They mean no thing. There's a hyphen between it. No thing. There was no distinction. There was no individuation. There was no duality. There was no hot, no cold, no wet, no dry, no tall, no small. No near, no far, no black, no white. There was no dialectic, no duality. Simply oneness, undifferentiated, unmanifest. The soul, if you would, was merged into the ocean of God. There was no experience of being an individual soul at all. There was only one experience. The Sikh and Radhaswami mystics called that state Sachkhand. The authors of Kabbalah called it Insof. The ancient Africans called it the state of being in Amen. The Buddhists call it Nirvana. Words have been used through time by different cultures, all to refer to this state of nothingness, no thingness. It is hard for the mind to even imagine that, because your mind can only think in terms of dialectics. Your mind can only think in terms of dualism. Our minds, our intellects cannot think of something being cold without simultaneously having a concept of something that is hot. It doesn't happen. So it's hard for us to even imagine that there was something before there was anything, that there was nothing before there was anything, that things come out of this nothingness, this potentia, as one philosopher called it, simply potentia existed. And in that sea of potentia, in that moon, as the ancestors call it, in those waters, as some of the early Christian fathers and mothers called it, in that ocean, the wave rose that gave birth to the first differentiation. This wave of the will of God, if you will. This word of God, this logos, this shabbat, this nod, this sound. And the creation began. Now, I'm just going over this casually with you because you have to understand some of the cosmology of the phenomena that gave birth to the experience of your individualism. And out of this unmanifest, undifferentiated sea of potentia, there arose the so-called soul. And I said so-called. Later we will appreciate why I call it so-called. And this was the first descent then of consciousness down through all of the lower manifestations of existence. In the parlance of these mystics, it was the descent of the soul from God down into creation. There was not yet a creation on the first separation. In fact, the souls didn't even know they were separate. They were separate, but they didn't know it. They had no concept. There was still this feeling, this experience of oneness, even though in reality they had become separate. That was the next stage, right beneath, right below that state of total existential oneness. And then the creation moved again, and the soul descended further toward creation. And at its next level, it became aware of its own individuation. It became aware of its own separatism. Now remember, this is still a very high state. There's still yet no time, no space, no causality. There is still no mind, no senses, no body. Nothing. That state where the soul becomes aware of its own individuation. The state that the Sikh and Radhaswami mystics called the level of Sohang, the Bhagwan, the second and third seraph of the Kabbalah system. The experience of their own individuation came into it. And that was the first illusion. Maya, as the Hindus call it. And what is Maya? Maya fundamentally means illusion. And the Mahamaya, the great Maya, is the illusion that you are separate. All other illusions arises from this one fundamental illusion. So at this fourth level, looking up from the bottom up, is where we come into this experience of our own individualism for the first time. And then the soul descends further into the creation. Now it picks up a mind and the experience of time. You see, it is covered now, right? And that sense of separation becomes a little bit more intense. It becomes a little bit more intense. And then they descend a little bit further and they pick up the so-called astral body, or the body of sensory systems, and the ability to perceive, so forth and so on. And then with each further descent of the soul into creation, the intensification of the experience of separation goes on increasing. And then, of course, finally we find ourselves at the physical level, right? Encased in a physical body. And at the maximum level where we experience our so-called individuation and separateness. So we will revisit some of this as we go on throughout the rest of the workshops. But I wanted to start off by setting the tone, setting the stage, so that you can begin to understand the metaphysical origin of the experience of egotism. And again, for most of us, that is not going to be accessible, because we're talking about things that you, by definition, cannot comprehend at this level of awareness. So let us reverse the direction now, and let us begin to approach this subject now looking at a level that we can understand, which is the psychosocial origin of ego. Okay? And I'll try best I can to help you visualize this. The mystics have talked about fundamentally 7 different stages in the evolution of ego. Now, I want us to understand that this ego is a very important thing. It is very important that you have ego. Now, I know this is striking you as odd, because I just said just a few minutes ago that the aim and objectives of the great tradition is to become egoless, right? And that all that we strive for on the spiritual path is to attain this state of egoism. And yet, on the other hand, I am telling you that ego is absolutely necessary. It has a useful function. It is imperative that you have ego. But I already warned you that we'll be traveling in a dimension, you see, that is not always logical. It's cosmological. And so you have to come up a notch. You have to be able to think holistically. You have to cease making separations between day and night and understand that they are simply different parts of the same reality. You have to cease making distinction between good and evil and understand that good and evil are simply different dimensions of one reality. That fear and love are linked together. It is the same energy. So you have to move to the very highest parts of your intelligence. After all, this is the function of intelligence, is to help us understand this mystery that we call life. So, ego, I'm saying, has its function. It's like this. Consider ego like a toothache. We all had a toothache, right? Painful, isn't it? Right? But think about it. If you had not had a toothache, then you cannot enjoy your toothache-lessness. If you never had a toothache, you can enjoy not having a toothache. It's not possible. You see my point? So you have to have ego in order to really experience egolessness. And that is a very strange concept at first. If you have not had a strong, mature ego, then it is very unlikely that you will ever achieve a state of egolessness. Now, I know this is strange to you, but I have to tell you what my perception of the truth is. And I leave it to you to judge it. The problem, you see, is that most of us have weak egos. Now, I know I'm getting into trouble now. Our egos are not yet mature enough to transform into the experience of egolessness. And I want you to see why I make that statement. But please bear in mind that in order to attain egolessness, we must mature to all of the stages of ego. In order to appreciate not having a toothache, you must have a toothache. In order to appreciate food, you must have hunger. The opposite experience. In order to appreciate higher dimensions of consciousness, you must have the experience of this dimension of consciousness. In order to appreciate heaven, you must have the experience of this hell. It is mandatory. Let us begin. I want you to understand it all begins with this thing called birth, which itself is an illusion, because how can that which has never been in time be born? If birth is a reality, then death, its opposite, is also a reality. But that which we are, in essence, never was born. Therefore, how can it die? What is born in us? Egoism. Birth and death refers to this experience of egotism, this experience of separateness. One of the Zen masters have always put the question to us. They ask, what was your original face like before your grandmother was born? What did you look like? The imposition is that that which you are at the deepest levels existed even before your mother existed. That something in you is very elemental. Something in you has been floating around since time immemorial that simply coalesced in the form of that birth. But that which you are pre-existed all of these conditions. Before this body was even manufactured, part of it was in my father since he was a little boy. Part of it was in my mother since she was a little girl. They had not even met. And I was in potential. And so it was with all of us. So I want you to understand that we have to use these words very carefully. But if we begin to look at it, during the time of your birth, when you were still yet in your mother's womb, let us use that as a state of egolessness, as an experience of egolessness. Because when you was in the womb, you were one with your mom. You had no sense of individuation. There was no sense of I, no sense of me at all. You was in a state of oneness. Some psychologists said that we all unconsciously seek to psychologically re-experience this oneness that we experienced in our mother's womb, to re-experience that thing that they call oceanic bliss, the oneness that we experienced in our mother's womb. So let us use that as a symbol of egolessness. That is something that is accessible to our imaginations. You can imagine how the child in this mother womb is just a part of that whole milieu. No individuation. They have not yet come out into this world. They are in a state of oneness. They are unmanifest. And after birth begins the whole development of this ego. The first phase in the development of ego and this experience of separateness is the emergence of the body self. When the child comes into the world, quote unquote, it still does not have a full experience of being separate from its mother. Is that interesting? Mothers, you all know that better than a lot of us men because you are right in the midst of it. And the woman doesn't have a strange thing. It works both ways. And the woman don't know that the baby is no longer part of them. They still have this feeling. And that feeling lingers, literally, all of the mother's life in connection with their children. Isn't that interesting? That child always feels one with you. And it's hard for a female to break that experience, that psychological and emotional umbilical cord remains connected. Because she too has had a taste of oneness. The child then, when they come out of their mother's womb, the ego is still very weak. The child really doesn't have a sense of separation. And it begins to start developing that sense of separation in its early stages of development. The first 15 months or so of a child's life is all related to their coming into a state of physical, individual separation from the parent, the mother particularly. They very often do not know the difference between inside and outside. Little children, when you see they'll go to a television set, they really can't make the distinction that that television, the people in there are not really out here. They don't know. There's a fuzziness there. They're not able to distinguish between the outside and the inside. There's experience that have not yet been broken up into a subject and an object. There is no subject-object faculty in them. And this then becomes the first stage of the development of the experience of ego. And some people stay locked in this first stage all of their life. Once they finally are able to establish a sense of individuation, when they are finally able to feel separate physically, and that the body is the foundation of their identity, very often they never move beyond that point. And they go on the rest of their life feeling that I am a body only. Have you ever noticed there are those people whose whole life and all their energy revolves around just this physical body? That I am the bodiness type of philosophy. These are individuals whose ego never developed beyond the first stage. It is interesting, yes, Emily. No, I mean people who are basically materialistic.
Oh, materialistic.
Yes.
Okay.
The body self, the body ego, the first stage of development, when that identification of who you are is locked into your body, then, and if it never emerged from there, you remain on the level of materialism, food and sex. All your actions, everything you think do will be centered around this body, this physical body. Because that's who you think you are. That's all you think you are. You didn't go any further in your developmental stages of ego. Let us continue. Hopefully this will get a little clear. And as usual, the first workshop is always the hardest workshop, isn't it? Because we have to introduce so much new material. The next stage in the evolution and the development of our egos is that stage where we begin to develop self-identity. self-identity. We have discovered that we're no longer in our mother's womb. We have finally discovered that there's a difference between outside and inside, right? We now begin to put together a identity in the sense that we want to develop a identity that has continuity. You see, we want to somehow be assured that the self that existed yesterday is the same self that exists today. It will be the same self that exists tomorrow. We start developing a continuity of self. Right? You'll see little children, for instance, they'll get in the mirror and they'll just look at themselves and they'll just, wow. You see? They're reassuring themselves that I'm still here. I'm the same one that was here yesterday. This is me. This experience of me gets developed. A me that is distinct from others and has continuity. You see? It has a continuity. In fact, the feeling when this stage of ego development is complete is that this me will always exist. And you'll find that there are many of us who are on these spiritual paths and in religion under the delusion that this second stage of ego development, that we define ourselves as the soul, but really remain the me, and that this thing will live forever. This is the me that wants to go to heaven. This is the thing that wants to avoid hell. This is the thing that wants to become enlightened. This is the thing that wants to attain Buddhahood. And this thing here is impermanent. This thing here will die. It has no existence beyond this physical body. It has arisen out of it. It is nothing but a collection of the experiences that have occurred to this physical body. And it too shall pass. Yes, sister?
I have a question. Okay, when you mentioned about the soul as being me and not living past the physical body, because people use the soul, like you say, whether it's religious organizations or individuals, then what is a soul then?
That's a very good question. And I hope Pam will answer that for you right after I finish. But I'm only teasing you. We'll address that as we go through. Let me develop it a little bit more. Because the reality is that what we're calling soul, most of us have no idea of what our soul is. We really don't. We have no real conscious experience of being a spirit. Our conscious experience is in the body. And a collection of the history that has occurred in this body. That is what constitutes our feeling of me. When you say me, that is what you're referring to. Your body, your name. A very important component in the self-identity is name. The child now knows his name. You see? And when you ask them, who am I, then you get the word name. So they become very identified with their name. Things of that. And so this me starts developing. And when we're stuck at that level of ego development, our whole ambition is the perpetuation of this me. This me. This historical me. And we want this historical me, when the body dies, we still think this me will survive the body and go to heaven. And anyone that is aware of that can easily exploit us because we want this thing to live forever. And this thing does not live forever. It is false. It is simple. And it will not survive the death of this body. Very often, it don't even survive the life of this body. But for sure, it will not go beyond the life of this body. So if you've been imagining yourself up in heaven, you might as well drop it. Because that you think you are don't have a shot of going to heaven. That is not that part of you that will be in heaven at all. that part of you that you're calling me will be left right here. And this is what creates the terror in all of us of death. Because somehow, deep down inside, intuitively, you know this me is not going to survive. But you open that priest is right. You open that mullah, that imam, that rebbe is right in their exploitation of us. And them telling us, oh, don't worry about it, Bhagwan, that you will be right there on the right-hand side of Christ. You see? You will be right there sitting next to the Buddha. You see? But something deep down inside of us recoils. And death becomes a terrifying thought. Because remember, at some point in time, you will not be anymore. Yes, the world will be here. Birds will go on chirping. Sunrises will go on happening. And the sunsets will still be beautiful. And the seasons will rotate. True. Waves will still crash against the seashore, but you will not be here to experience that at all. You will be no more. And all those whom you love will still be here. See? But you will not be here. And whenever our minds begin to drift onto that truth, and that's one of the noble truths of the Buddha, is that this ego, this thing that you think you are, this me that you think you are, this thing is of the nature that it will get sick. Because you have an identity that's just made up of your body itself and this self-identity. That's all the ego you got. That complex will get sick. This physical body will get sick. The body ego is of the nature that it will get sick and it will die. Reality. It will die. It will grow old. And none of the relationships that you are in are permanent. None. And when one begins to reflect on these kind of truths, it fills one with a certain terror. Because there will be no me after this body is gone. No me that is going to any paradise at all. And this is hard. We will come back again throughout the course of these workshops and we will explore these things in a little bit more detail. Let us continue looking at the unfolding of ego from this initial state of egolessness in our mother's womb, right, to full-blown ego. And remember, I've said already that unless there is a full unfoldment of ego, then we will not be able to return to this experience of egolessness. There's a kind of egolessness in the womb that is unconscious. It is egolessness, but it's unconscious egolessness. You can experience it. There's no toothache, but you don't experience the bliss of no toothache because why? You have yet to have a toothache. The unfoldment of the ego is the way existence gives you a toothache. You understand? And so then when you encounter egolessness beyond the levels of egotism, then you can appreciate that state. What happens next in our evolution as egos, and remember this experience of separateness, we adding on to it, we're deepening it, right, as we go through this process. The next stage that we come to is what we call the extension of ego. The ego begins to extend itself. I don't know if that's right, extension. Close enough. The ego extends itself. The key word to understand here is mind. The mindset emerges. Here is the key word, is me. Mine. Now the ego begins to extend itself, doesn't it? It begins to bring other elements, incorporate other elements and things into the definition of itself, into the experience of itself. This is my gun. This is my dolly. This is my toy. You see the child clearly when they enter into this stage of ego development, because they start becoming very, very attached, very, very possessive, very, very selfish, as we call it, right, as parents. We'll tell the children, don't be so selfish, share. Oh, no, hell no, I don't want to share. It's mine. Now, somebody picks it up and the kids don't even want to play with the toy. They're not interested. That's not the point. The point is, that's my toy. And this other little boy or this other little girl can't have it. Well, I'm not interested in using it, but it's mine. It is a part of me. It belongs to me. And we start now entering into the world of attachment. What is attachment? And what makes attachment so difficult? Attachment is nothing but the extension of your sense of identity onto other things and people. You incorporate them into your own definition of who you are, and you therefore cling to them. Right? Just as you did when you were 3 years old. Please notice it. Many of us have never developed our ego beyond this third stage. And today, that's my house, my car. This is my TV. You watch this TV unless I tell you this is mine. Who you think this is my house? You get out. I mean, listen to it just in our day-to-day language. You see? And whenever somebody do something to this thing that I have called mine, look how agitated you get. You messing with my stuff. Right? This is your stuff. Yes, it is the stuff that you are made out of now. So in addition to your personal history and all these other things, now you add to it your possessions. This is mine. Mine and not yours. And we create more distance between us and other people. Right? The gap go on increasing. In fact, this state here is a state where very serious conflict in personal relationships begins. Very serious trouble begins here. You're getting deep into the dukkha now, right? You're getting deep into suffering, right? And remember, suffering comes through these doors. These are the doors through which your suffering comes. These are the doors through which dukkha enters your life. These are the doors through which misery consumes you. Mine. And remember, everything that you call mine will ultimately be taken from you, or you will be taken from me. That is the law. That's how it is. My house. Now, before you bought the house, somebody else was calling it their house. What is this? Right? And in any event, sooner or later, either you will die or you lose the house, one or the other. It's just a temporary thing. Yes, we can use these things, of course. But we don't own them. And worse, they are not extensions of us. And it is at this third developmental stage that we now take on the additional covering, the additional layer that begins to give us the feeling of being made up of the things we possess, the things that we call mine. And whenever that which is mine is threatened, I feel threatened. Strange, isn't it? Yes, sister.
Well, Bhagwan, how should we refer to it then?
You have no choice. I'm saying we got to go through this. This is the Tuesday stuff.
I mean, although it's really,
Yeah.
my car, though, but how should I refer to it?
No. We have to use these language.
Oh,
It's
okay.
colloquial, but we should understand behind it. You see,
okay.
there should be some understanding.
Oh, okay.
You see, because there is no language that that you can speak in accurately,
Oh.
right? And because you're going to find that this understanding is the key. You see, as we begin to go through these series, you will find that the faculty in us, the quality in us that has been given to us for the transcendence of this ego formation is intelligence. It is understanding. We all have been endowed with the capacity to understand, even though it's dormant, even though it's just been laying there for years, for centuries, for innumerable births, undeveloped births. Nevertheless, it exists in us. And the whole aim and objective of meditation and yoga and spiritual practice is to trick, to revitalize this dormant capacity of us to understand. And as this understanding exists, it transforms all of the experience. So we will come back to that. And so the most important thing is your understanding. We need not worry too much about our lexicon. Because what else can we do? The masters have always said that if you speak, once you've done that, you've already told a half-truth. Already. I'm reminded of a story about St. John, the great mystic, after becoming an old man, was asked on one occasion to give a discourse on the beautiful teachings of Christianity, of Christ, to speak to an audience, give them some kind of idea of what it means to become a Christ. And remember, Jesus' name was not Christ. Christ was the name of the state of consciousness that he was in. And they wanted St. John to speak to that process, speak to the dynamics of becoming Christ. And St. John took what seemed like forever to get up out of his seat and make his way to the crowd. And there he stood before them, and he said, "Look," and went down. Now, these people who have put together this thing said, "Man, you've been sitting out here for hours in this hot sun. You know, some have come long ways and bought food and stuff, and they've heard about you. Better get up, because we're going to have a battle right here. You better say something." Right? And John said, "Well, if I say more, then I'll begin to lie. Then I'm going to be distorting. I'm going to be corrupting it. I've already said as much of the truth that can be said. And it took me a long time." He said, "What do you think I was sitting here for? I was trying to get my words together. I was trying to be as accurate, as precise in my language as possible." And he said, "The only word that I found in the entire vocabulary available to me, to mankind, was this word. I got this word stuff. Now you want me to go now and start lying to him." But the man said, "Say some more." He said, "Well, love in all things will be added." He said, "Now from here, I'm not going to go." The point is that words fill us. It's the understanding. So, when we are at this third stage of ego development, in the stage where we have begun the extension of our ego, we begin to add to our experience of being ego this experience of things being mine. Remember, there was a time when you didn't feel anything was yours. I know you can't remember it. It's there though, it's buried. But there was a time in each and every one of our life where you did not have this experience of anything being yours. And you were blissful. Absolutely blissful. All of your problems begin to escalate with the manifestation of this stage of ego. Life starts going downhill. And the vast majority of mankind and womankind almost never go beyond this stage. Almost never. Whole life now is spent trying to perpetuate and maintain the existence of their ego extensions. And every time one of those extensions is threatened, they experience pain and suffering. My car broke down. Now, you ain't gonna sleep for 2 weeks. You lay awake at night, you can't even sleep pulling because your car, my transmission went out, man. I'm in misery. Now, you're not a transmission, but in this state, you make no distinction between you and your transmission. There is no distinction between you and your car at all. And you just suffer because it is in the nature of transmissions to go out. It's inevitable, right? It's inevitable. And the vast majority of us never go beyond. The fourth developmental stage that we come to in the evolution of our egos, we come to this stage that we can call the development of self-creativity. The creative ego, right? Now you might not have watched this in your own development. How many still got small children? If I were you, I would get out a notebook and I would study that kid, because that kid, that child will be a Quran to you. They will be a Bible to you. They will be a great scripture. They will give you more knowledge than the Vedas, than all of the sutras put together. Just watch them. See into it. If they're still younger than 7, you really have hit birthday. And for those of you who don't have any children younger than 7, all right, start over again. You messed up, okay? Because you should have watched your first set. So start all over again. Make you 2 or 3 more kids, right? And maybe you can see. No? Then you better pay close attention to me. All right. The creative stage of ego. You'll see the child eventually hit a stage of ego development where the whole emphasis is on doing something. This is the stage where they become the doer. They don't want you to carry nothing. I don't care, I can carry it myself. I want to do this myself. They want to do stuff themselves. They don't want no help. Don't put my shoes on, I want to dress myself now. Don't comb my hair no more, I'm a bigger. They want to become doers. They want to express their own creativity because they are a self. They got a sense of identity. They have made their extensions, and now they have discovered their own creative power, and they want to demonstrate that in their life. And and when you interfere with that, you get a reaction from them. Is that right? They don't want you to interfere with their power. They're doing their thing now. You see, they become capable of doing their own thing, and they love doing it. And sometimes you'll see them. Even when learning language, they'll just go on asking you questions. Mommy, where is Daddy? Daddy's at work. Mommy, where is Daddy? Daddy's at work. Mommy, they'll go ask you 10 times. They're not interested in your answer. They just practicing saying, Mommy, where is Daddy? They're enjoying their mastery over the ability to speak. There's nothing behind the questions. You understand? They're running. You see little boys, they take off, they're just running. And you say, what are you running for? They ain't running for no reason. They just are practicing running. They enjoy running. I'm practicing my running. And I'm not going anywhere. In particular, just running. Just talking. Sometimes they'll hum, what do you hum? They're humming about nothing. They're just doing their humming. They're practicing. Doing their humming. They like to do stuff. And when we interfere with the normal development of the creative ego, we set up some big problems. We set up some big problems. We almost have to learn how to channel this. And this is all very insightful, especially for those of us who are parents. It's also insightful for those of us who are in relationship with another human being, period. Husbands and wives, we all need to understand that, because you may be married to somebody that never developed their ego beyond their level of identification with the body. They may be stuck there. That means all you can do is have sex and give that person something to eat. Now, if you cut down on that, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to have hell in your house. You see, you're talking about abstract stuff, retirement, traveling. This person's not interested in traveling. This person's not interested in what's going on in the world. They're not interested in world issues. This person is saying, where's the food? Where's the sex? Do something for me. Meaning, do something for my body. Give my body some food and some sex, some pleasurable experience. And that's it. And you have to be aware. You have to be aware of all. So there is then the fourth developmental stage in the evolution of our ego, where we come into possession of creativity, the power and ability, and we become doers. And there are those of us who are stuck in that state, where, like that little kid, we're just talking. It has no meaning. We're just practicing talking. We're going to church. You know, what happened to Jesus? How did Jesus do this? And how did Buddha do this? And how did Mark? But you're not interested in no answers. You're just talking. You just you practicing formulating questions. Just like you did when you were 4 years old. How did the world come into being? How do I meditate? You're not going to do any meditation. You have no intention whatsoever. You're just practicing talking. You're practicing talking. You're practicing asking questions. You're just doing stuff. You're just doing shit. You see? With no aim, no line, no reason. You're just doing it. Where you going? I don't know. Now you're breaking your neck running. Where you going, Bhagwan? I don't know, but I'm running. Where are you going? What are you doing? Ask yourself, what are you trying to do with your life? Really, think about it. What are you trying to do with your life? Really? Have you ever thought? What are you actually trying to do with your life? Every day you get up here rushing around doing this, but yeah, I understand. But what is the point? What are you trying to consciously and deliberately do with your life? And for most of us, we don't have a clue. We just doing shit and hoping for the best. Is that right? Is that true? You're with us? All right. So that is the stage where all of the emphasis is simply on doing. But doing with no goal, no clear-cut understanding of why you're doing it, with no particular and deliberate plan at all. You're just doing stuff. At the fifth stage in the evolution of our egos, we begin to develop a rational dimension. To our ego. We become rational. Very few people get here. But we become rational. We begin to think. We begin to accumulate knowledge. Information. We become reflective. Unlike that doer who just doing stuff. We do, but we are reflective. We reflect on what we do. We may still not know where we're going, but we're reflecting. We're pausing, we're examining, we're able to see into something. We're able to penetrate a little of this veil. There's a little bit more control now. You see, we're a little bit more deliberate. We become rational. We become the thinking. Philosophers, teachers, professors, writers, great men and women of intellect, they have at least developed enough ego to do those things. A person that's first stage ego development can't be no philosopher, can't be no teacher. I've already said, this person is just trying to get them some food, some sex. They're not even interested in teaching nobody nothing. You see? Only those egos who have matured. And remember, this is kind of like maturity, isn't it? You can think of these as levels of ego maturation. And at the sixth level of ego maturation, we now have matured to a point where, as egos, we can become reflective. All the great contributions to civilization has come from these six stage developed egos. We can't make no computer. Yeah, we can buy it and plug it in, but no way we can figure it out. We're not even interested in math and circuitry and binary things. We don't. Man, I'm not interested in that stuff. I'm trying to find out where the party is somewhere. You see? My ego is too immature to be interested in that stuff at all. So the rational ego, that stage, is another stage of ego that we have to mature to. Yet there are people who are stuck at that level as well. And they never go beyond. They never go beyond. Actually, I should have called this 6 because I'm thinking of the real 5th one that I want to interject here. So let me call that number 6. Let's go back and give you another 5. And I want to get that because we don't talk so much about it, I can't miss the opportunity to talk to you about it again. It is that stage of ego development where we develop our self-image. Okay? Remember, I'm going to be calling the 6th stage the development of the rational. But I want to talk about this 5th stage in the development of our egos, the level of our self-image. That's why I want to remind all of us again of what's all involved in there, right? But we start developing this image of ourselves. Right? And this is a stage where all of that arrogance begins to come in, isn't it? Remember, we have talked so much about self-esteem and all of that. We talk so much about arrogating to ourselves qualities and virtues that we don't even possess, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of that material is beginning to take place as we enter into that 5th developmental stage, where we now are formulating our image of ourselves. Right? We're beginning to develop an image of ourselves. And God knows what we put into that image of ourselves. Actually, what makes up the image that we form of ourselves? This is usually the stage of feedback, isn't it? Our parents, our brothers, our sisters, friends, associates begin to give us feedback. They begin to comment on that package that we done put together, right? That persona, that ego, that image of that thing that we have created ourselves to be. When it interacts with other people, they give us feedback, don't they? And they say, oh, well, Bhagwan, you this, or Bhagwan, you that, right? And you begin to start forming an image of yourself. Other people become like the mirrors that you look into in order to get a glimpse of who you are. And that glimpse becomes your persona, and you start trying to act it out. Now, someone who, first of all, don't know who they are, have told you something that you have bought as absolute truth about yourself. Is that right? They've said, Barani Rod, you so-and-so, you're like this, you like this. And now, you buy that, right? We see children, you see, when they hit that state of ego development, where they begin to formulate their images of themselves, very often this is what the most abuse takes place. Because some parent has said, oh, you're no good, or oh, you're very smart, you're better than everybody else. Now, that arrogance now will follow you all through your life because your mom and daddy were telling you how much better you are than the neighbors. And you bought that crap, right? And now you walking around, right? And you actually have this built-in feeling that you're better than people because your parents have put it into you. And you will form your image of yourself based on that. And then you set yourself up for all kinds of heartaches and heartbreaks. Because the reality ain't nobody better than nobody. If anything, we might be a little worse than other people. But certainly, for sure, we're not that. So we begin then to develop that image of ourselves. Now, of course, you can see now why the rational stage of development will come afterward, because the rational self, the rational ego, can begin to look back at and examine this self-image again, right, and edit it. But you have to be very mature to do that. If the degree of ego development has not gone beyond the 5th stage, where you've just formulated your image of yourself, if you've not been able to mature to the next level, you can't critique yourself. You cannot truly see into yourself. You cannot look into yourself. Now, when you get angry, you can't handle your anger because you cannot pause and try to see into the nature of your anger. It's very interesting. When you are practicing good, effective management of your anger, if you're doing this thing right, then what you will find, if you look deep into the nature of your anger, and you go into all of the subtle and underlying aspects of it, that anger will transform itself into compassion. Please make it. When you have really gone deep into that anger, now somebody has done something to you, you're full of rage, you're angry, but you don't go into it. You don't have enough maturity. You can't go back into it because your image is saying that person has done something wrong to me, that person is no good, they're bad, blah, 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 blah. I'm perfect, I've given them no reason. You understand all the nonsense that we say to ourselves, right? All the defensiveness we go through, right? We're trying to protect that self-image that we have formulated of ourselves so tenacious that we cannot investigate. Because remember, some has come into you. This anger has come into you. It's on your turf. It's in your house. You should investigate it, shouldn't you? If there's a noise downstairs, shouldn't you find out what's going on? You may have to call the police, or you may have to use that baseball bat or something, but you need to investigate. But this anger comes into you, and you don't investigate it. You never pause and see, wow, why am I having this kind of strong reaction to what this person said? You don't look at that. What's going on in me, right? What's there deep inside of me that has caused me to get so angry about this little thing? Now they didn't say good morning to me, and I'm furious. Why? Go into that. What's in you that is the root cause of this kind of overreaction? And to do that, you need to have some degree of ego maturity. You need to go into that because you're looking for something that may be wrong in you, something that may be weak in you. You also know what is right in you. It's not that you only know what is wrong with you, you also know what is right with you. You know those areas that you are strong in, those areas that are your good qualities. You're very aware of that. Some people's problem is that they don't know what's wrong with them, nor do they know what's right with them. Now they're in just bad shape. They're just in bad shape. They don't know their weaknesses, nor do they know their strengths. You know? Not enough ego maturity. See? So at the 6th stage of ego development, we for the first time begin to develop some small capacity for insight, the ability to look back into ourselves and see. And remember, we're looking back into ourselves not to judge, not to condemn, but to understand. I want to understand what in me is generating this kind of reaction. Not only with anger, the same should be done with your fear. When we become full of fear, the normal instinct is to flee, to escape. And the mystics said, no, 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 turn. Because something foreign is inside of you. Something going on inside you. Look into the nature of your fear. What is causing you to have this frightening, fearful reaction? Look into that. And when you look deep into fear, just that deep in just that looking transforms fear into love. Strange. Very strange. But this is the power of understanding, sister, that you mentioned earlier. This is how we are to use our understanding so that we can know and be able to explore all of the stuff that is going on in our subjectivity. And by exploring them, we're able to transform them. Because remember, life is dialectic. It is dualistic. Fear and love. These are polar opposites. You can all transform any fear into love. Make no mistake about that. Please make a note of that. Every area of your life where you experience fear, if you can become mature enough to turn your insight back in and investigate and explore that, you will be able to convert that fear into. Every area of your life where there's still a lot of anger, if you are able to become mature enough to turn your seeing inward and explore the nature of that anger at that person, it will transform that anger into compassion. And remember, there's a distinction between compassion and sympathy. Very often your sympathy is an ego trip. Poor thing, look at them, I feel so sorry for you. That's not compassion. It's arrogance. You tripping. You secretly feel, oh, I'm better than that person. Poor person. You're looking down at them. Compassion you can have for people who have injured you, hurt you, have done something that you perceive as being wrong. And if you look into that perception of somebody doing something wrong to you, that has caused you this anguish and this hurt, and you can look deep into the nature of your own anger, the understanding that will emerge will turn your reaction from one of anger to pure compassion. They didn't know what they were. They are as ignorant as I am. You see? It's a very different experience. And that is the secret. Right? This is what the Buddhists have called the Buddha. The word Buddha comes from that. One who has awakened this capacity to understand. Now let's say just something quickly about the seven, and then I think we have stories coming up. The seventh stage in the formation and development of our egos has to do with our striving, our intent. Once the ego has matured to these levels, now we begin to seek answers to that question that I was asking you. What are you trying to do with your life? When the ego becomes mature, when it reaches this seventh stage of maturation, it begins to seek answers to those questions now. What am I trying to do with my life? It begins to strive now to live life meaningfully. It's no longer so immature that it's just running around doing shit just for the sake of doing shit. You understand? It becomes much more on purpose. It begins to strive. It is trying to find some meaning. It is pondering that question. What am I trying to do with my life? It is now tackling this profound question. It is understood. You see, it is intelligent. It knows this body is going to go. It is understood that relationships are temporal, transient. It's understood all this stuff. And now, out of that understanding, it is trying to find some way to live that is reflective of all its knowledge and experience that it has gained. Very often when we hit our 40s and we start going through this midlife crisis, you know, usually that crisis occurs among people who have at least developed a certain degree of ego maturity, where they pause now and they asking that question. Do I want to spend the next 25 years with this man, with this woman, on this job? You know, they begin to question all of that because they become mature. And saying, this is crap, this is junk. I'm just going through motion. I'm not doing this no more. Right? Something in them starts insisting for more. Yes, sister?
Okay, looking at the final stage of returning back in a sense, reversing itself, the ego, or I should say releasing the ego,
Yes.
if that's what I would take it, then would you say at that point that it is then returning back to its natural state or the state of enlightenment?
Yes. In fact, you just said it. From the seven, now you go back to egoism. After you have exhausted all of your striving, but first you have to be mature enough to be striving. When we hit this striving part, now we exhaust ourselves. Now we are searching, and we are searching diligently. We're not playing no more. Before you were playing with this search. Now you're serious. You become like a Buddha. You are in the forest. You are meditating. You're doing yoga. You're going all over this world, every nook, every corner, everywhere you hear about something that will help you solve this problem that you're having. Is a mature ego. You have gone, right? And you exhaust it. And in the process of exhausting that, like Buddha, you sit under the boat and you become enlightened. It's like when this becomes ripe, like fruit, enlightenment falls of its own. But remember, there's no way to cheat. You see, I have to remind you, because you know, we cheat as much as we can, right? You can't cheat. You must absolutely exhaust that level of ego. You must exhaust it. Yes, brother.
That was going to my question.
Yes.
I was wondering, I'm interrupting you answering the question because, you know, I know you illustrating the stage, and I was thinking, I said, it's important. So that means, well, like myself, 27, may be still in the mind of the ego and think that he's a rational self. And, you know, and then that's why I'm feeling that, you know, pain. You know, and,
remember, you said this now.
yeah, but I'm just saying,
Yes.
what a suggestion you think,
Yes.
do you really think that someone can work those out? Is it has to be a certain...
Normally they do travel chronologically, but not always. Hence, you can find young people, teenagers, who are very mature already. It depends on what you brought into this life. It depends on what you were in your previous birth. You see? So it's only a kind of question that can be answered on a one-on-one basis. But as a rule, you see, and remember, there's always exceptions to rules. But as a rule, these occur in stages, you see. And very often, remember, these are not pigeonholes. Sometimes two of these developmental stages will coalesce. You'll be working on two things at once. So it's really kind of individualistic. That's why one has to explore oneself. That's why all the mystics have said since time immemorial, know thyself. Because you want to know where you're at here. And this is getting good insight, right? And once you become aware that, my God, I am still so immature, I'm living my whole life at the level of mind. I'm still caught up in mind. I'm still caught up in me. Oh, God, I'm still caught up in my body. You know, sometimes something from the outside has to shake us up so that we become aware of this. Because those who are asleep, by definition, can't wake themselves up. Hence, the need for a Buddha, a Jesus, a Muhammad, a Moses, a patahotep, a kadir, a dadu, a lautus, a benshimto, a baha'u'llah. These people have to come and they have to speak to us in such a way that it makes us wake up a little bit. An object at rest will remain at rest unless acted upon by an outside force. This is just a law of nature. And so it is with our minds. Hence, the greatest benefit that can occur to any human being in any lifetime is to come in contact with teachings of these great men and women. You see? Because unless we are able to encounter the teachings of these great masters, then we will simply remain asleep. And when they asked Buddha, who are you? What are you? Buddha simply said, I'm neither male nor female. You see, I'm not a Brahmin or a Karashitra. You know, I'm not Indian, I'm not white. Then what are you, Buddha? I am simply a Buddha. It's a different species of human beings, the awakened ones. And all of us have the capacity to be Buddha. Please make no mistake about that. You see, in all of us, therein lies that capacity. So we begin first, though, by strengthening our egos. Getting mature, right? Until we can get to this point here where we're really striving. And then to strive and play the game. Play it all the way out. And then a point will come, sister, where you realize, the ego realizes it is gone as far as it can. And then the ego does what? It submits. Submit. It surrenders. It let go. It's beautiful. And in that letting go, and in that surrender, and in that submission, egolessness comes into it. This submitting to the will of God, this submission, you see, is what ultimately dissolves the ego. It's just like the stick that we use to make a fire. We rub them together, get that fire going, and then we throw the sticks in. Right? It's like a boat that we take across a sea. Once we cross, we don't carry the boat on our head. We leave it moored. We done. It's done its job. Similarly, the ego has done its job when it is exhausted. And then you come to the experience of your powerlessness. Because right now you think you got power. Now you think you in control. Because you way down in the scale of your ego maturity. Right? You still caught up somewhere down in the third stage somewhere where you think you the doer. Right? The little 4-year-old kid think they can do everything. Mommy, let me carry up the TV set. I can carry. That's how they talk. Daddy, let me drive the car. Now the boy is 4 years old. How you gonna? I can drive. Can you drive? Yeah, I can drive. You know what I'm talking about. We have gone through that stage, and we see our children go through that stage. And yet many of us emerge into adulthood, and we're still in that stage. What I call magical thinking. You know, you still think you can leap tall buildings in a single bounce and all this other nonsense. That means your ego is not tall. It's not. And we have to exhaust it. Sister, I guess we'll take her question, then we'll take our break. Yes, sister.
Well, I had two, but I think I'll ask one, and then ask the other one at break time.
All right.
Okay, and that is going back to the soul. Then would the soul then equal the mind?
No, and I'm glad you asked that question. Next workshop we'll begin to go into that. You see, we say my soul, like my body. Anything that could be mine cannot be me by the soul is, yes, a certain level of reality about it. But that is essence of what you are is beyond the soul. The mystics have used the word spirit, but that's not a good word either. Because again, we can say my spirit. You are that which you cannot say, I am this about. But the Hindu says, nete, nete. Go on eliminating. Go on eliminating. Are you the body? No. Are you the senses? No. Are you the mind? No. Are you the intellect? No. Are you the... No, no, no. You are that which exists at the end of that process of nete, not this, not that.
So simply a me.
You can't even say that much. Huh?
So then a nothing.
I'm nothingness. Oh, you good. You catch on fast, huh? Right? Yeah, the closest you can say, I am nothingness. That's about as accurate as you can get. You're welcome. Let us take our break and then we'll resume, and Pam will give us a half hour or so of spiritual feeding, huh? Yes, sister.
I have to respectfully decline.
You're not prepared?
I mean, I'm not gonna be prepared for a long time. I would have to pull a St. John.
No. Let's say this. She'll be
I'm not
prepared
prepared.
next meeting to give us a thought, okay?
No, I'm not.
Yes.
I'm not.
None of us are, sister.
Well, all I can say.
Managing ego, that mind process that separates man's consciousness from God consciousness. And Emma escaped on us, but I'm sure on everybody's behalf we want to thank her for the record for that delicious meal. Oh, I tell you, satsang, it's not satsang unless Emma shows up with the food, huh?
Or Linda.
Yeah, Linda, yes. So we're really appreciative of all of those things. As you notice, this is the part where I had asked perhaps Pam if she could do a discourse. And I want to go about that a better way, because I certainly don't want to put anybody on the spot. But you have to understand, a Sangha is only made up of the people who are here. And we all have a responsibility to donate whatever we have for the benefit of the group, of the fellowship. We have to feed each other. Just as Emma or Linda or some of you all bring food here. That's savor. That's a donation. You're doing something. You are giving something that will benefit all of us. And you give it out of your love, you see. And you don't have to be a gourmet cook to do that kind of savor. What makes the food taste so good is the love that went into its preparation. We sponsor these workshops at no cost to you. Now, if you want to make a donation, that is fine. It should come out of your love. Again, out of that same spirit, you see, that you want to support the Sangha, because without a Sangha, none of us can make progress. That's just a fact. And so the same is the case with your intellect, you see. Now, you can donate and make food, you can donate money, because money is necessary to cover overhead, buy tapes, all of these things cost money. Teachings are free, electricity is not, okay? But in the same spirit, you are to donate some of your knowledge. And you don't have to be a Buddha. None of us are a Buddha. You see? We're just struggling souls coming together, searching for the light. And so there's something that you know you should share with us. And that is the spirit in which I have asked those of you who I know have stuff to donate some of your knowledge. And you shouldn't let your ego get in the way. Right? Oh, I don't want to look like a fool. Well, we already know we're all fools. What's the problem? Oh, I don't want to appear as if I don't know nothing. We don't know anything. It's not an appearance, it's a fact. But the community is a place where we can safely now, you see, do our savor without having to be worried about all of those other kind of things. You see, there's nobody marking us. There's no one grading us. There is no test. It is just one heart giving something to another heart. That is. So don't be afraid of this savor. This is a great savor. To have the opportunity to serve a Sangha is a great honor. It is a great privilege. Because you are contributing something that is aiding and abetting another human being who is on that spiritual search and making their progress. It is a tremendous thing. You're helping some other fellow soul who may be just on the verge of becoming a believer. And you may say something that triggers something in our hearts, in our minds. So you mustn't miss that opportunity. You see. We cannot talk abstractly about servicing humanity. Humanity is an abstract term. Wherever you find humanity, you will find just us, just people. And so if one cannot serve one Sangat, it is very unlikely that you will serve something more abstract called humanity. You see. So this kind of spirit begins at home. And we are a family of seekers. All of us are on the same path. Some of us are here, some of us are there, but we're all moving in the same direction. And so, coming from a big family, I'm accustomed to wearing hand-me-downs. That's no problem with me, you see. Hand me down your knowledge. I'll take it. It's fine. I have no problems with that. So, but I want you to do it in a state of comfort. So I am trying to make it comfortable for you. But I certainly don't want to put anybody on the spot. But if you are asked to do satsang, and you could find somewhere in your heart to do satsang. And even if out of 10,000 words, only one of them is necessary to penetrate a niche. After all, I can testify firsthand the power of sharing your knowledge. And had it not been for, at that time, a middle-aged, pipe-smoking machinist working in an obscure factory on the south side, I would have never heard anything about the teachings at all. And it was just out of an immense act of kindness that this older man would even talk to a 18-year-old know-it-all, gang-banging, dope-smoking bull, right? And just a few words he whispered into my ears, you see, was enough to trigger. The wick was there, yes. The candle was there, the wax was there, but there was no flame. And just a little of his flame touching my wick was enough. So don't underestimate, you see, because you don't know whom the Lord has sent into your presence for you to give the word to. And you have to remember that all of us who've been given so much is expected. And you all have been so fortunate, so many of you have explored so many paths, you see, have spent years studying all kinds of things. And in that course of your studying, you have acquired a great deal of information, a great deal of knowledge, a great deal of insight, a great deal of experience. And so we should not be shy to do seva in any capacity, whether feeding each other or supporting the Sangha or giving discourses or whatever. That's a tremendous opportunity. Because you could have been made a fool and then nobody would need you to say anything. Is that right? You could have not been given any kind of intelligence, and then no one will be disturbing you. But if the Lord has given you this, as Rumi says, if the Lord has given you a shovel, he has clearly expressed his wish. So, please consider that, right? No apology necessary, sister. It's not about it. It's just that I want you comfortable. I know because they've been telling you, Pam, you don't know anything. You've been hearing this all your life, but I know you know stuff. Yes. Nobody else wants to hear you. I want to hear you. Others tell you, oh, shut up, talk too much. They've been telling you that all your life. I'm telling you, talk to me. I come to hear you. What you have to say, I'm the one that God has sent to listen to what you have to say. We are the ones, you see. What they have, nobody else needs but us. Everybody else finds it absolutely useless. Your words have no impact. They can bring tears to my eyes. I'm the ears that goes with your voice. You are the ears that goes with my voice. We are family. So we have to feed each other. So please, don't miss the opportunity to do something. Now, I've taken up 10 minutes of that time. So let us continue. I think rather than to go to the next level of exploration and the origin and evolution and genesis of our egos, let us pause now to take any questions, to explore any of the stages that we have talked about already. Because I want to do this as thoroughly as possible because of the nature of the subject that we're discussing. Remember that it's this ego that is the core of the whole spiritual goal. Everything revolves around dealing with our egos. All of your misery, all of your suffering is rooted and related to this ego. So it is a worthy topic. Yes, sister?
Okay, one question that I have is this. Okay, at the beginning of the stage, you started off mentioning about the endless, the egolessness.
Yes.
Okay, which was in the woman's womb. And you finished that up by stating of the returning of that egolessness. And my question is this. When a person begins the stage after, the birth, or even prior to the birth, let's say they get to a level, let's say for an example, the second stage, which was the...
Self-identity.
I'm sorry?
Self-identity.
Right, self-identity, and they get stuck there. Now, the question I want to find out or to ask, if the person was stuck at the self-identity, would that not have them to be closer to the beginning stage than if they were to continue on? Or would it be necessary for the person to continue on in the ego stage to complete the cycle?
Yes, they would have to continue. Because the other one would be a movement back. And remember, the experience of ego-ness, boy, that's a tongue twister. You know what I'm saying. That experience within our mother's womb is fundamentally an unconscious experience. You see? And the experience of egolessness on the other side of the cycle is fully conscious. It is the difference between a rock Buddhahood and the Buddhahood of Guatemala. It is the difference between the state of Christos of a Christ and the state of the Christos in a piece of wood. Now, fundamentally, both are without mind. Because the Jesus, the Buddha, no mind, but conscious. In the womb, there is also no mind, but unconsciousness. And so the difference is in self-consciousness of the two identical states of egolessness. Patanjali, the codifier of the Yoga Sutras, the whole yogic system that we identified in India, talks about categories, if you will, of consciousness. And one of them, the lowest one, is what here is called the Susupti. Susupti is deep, dreamless sleep, where one is in an absolute state of peace, where there is a return to the unmanifest state, where mind drops out, all sensing drops out. But you exist in that deep state of Susupti. But you are unconscious of your existence. And because you're not conscious in this state of Susupti, you don't have a conscious experience of the bliss. And then on the other extreme, after Susupti, there's Swapana, then there's Jagra, and then there's the state that they call the Turiya, the fourth state, which is supra-consciousness. And supra-consciousness feels just like Susupti. They're the same states. There is no mind. And remember, when I say no mind, I mean that there is no experience of time. There is no experience of space. There is only the experience of the eternal now. The present. And remember, the presence that the mystics talk about is different from our ordinary understanding of what it means to be in the present moment. For us, the present moment is so fleeting because it is the transition of the past, right? Just going right ahead into the future. It's a flow of time we speak of. And the time, that time stops in the present is so short, a nanosecond, right? That is really a flash. But the presence that the mystics are talking about is eternal. One loses the experience of past and present and future. Time is not experienced in that dimension anymore. So in the state of superconsciousness, then it is the same experience that you have in your unconscious state of susupi. The only difference is that you're aware of it. The difference is in awareness. So it is with egolessness. In the womb, you are unaware. After the maturation and of ego and the ego striving, and then to the point of surrendering, then again now you're conscious of this egolessness. So you can't go backwards. To go backward is to become only more unconscious. To move up forward is to become increasingly more conscious. And notice that that is really what is happening. Even as the ego is maturing, right? There's increasing degrees of awareness, right? Notice also that there are shifts in identifications, right? At the first stage of body ego, one identifies oneself entirely with this physical body. And those who have become locked into the total identification with their body as the dominant core of their being suffer very much. Very much. Because they have become identified with this body, which itself is subject to constant change. It is fragile. It is but a bubble. You know, the least little thing can burst. And so people who are totally identified with their body as self usually live in a great state of fear. And fear. Because this body can go anytime. It gets sick, it hurts. I mean, so many things about that make our happiness and our experience of happiness very vulnerable, very temporary at best. As one moves on in the cycle of the evolution, then the basis of identification shifts, right? And this process continues, it continues, it continues. And after the seventh stage, the basis of one's identification with one's mind drops entirely. And this is what constitutes, technically, the real emergence into a spiritual thing. When one have the experience of no mindedness. Oh, I'm sure.
If I can word it. Okay, I guess I'm asking this question because you said the mind, the concept of me drops after death, right? That whole concept drops. Okay, is it ego that when we say I want to attain this and I want to attain that, that's ego, right?
Of course.
How are we able to, that's the only thing we can relate to, how can we experience blissfulness if that's the only thing? I guess I kind of,
Yes, you're saying that if the ego is the source through which we have all experiences, and we drop the ego, then how will we have any experience? That's your question.
Experience bliss.
Right. What will be there to experience bliss if not the ego?
Right.
Right? The self.
But
the self is really the core of all experience, even now.
Well, we have to experience ego to get to even self, right?
Yes, to begin to a conscious. The difference, by the Razoni in terms of consciousness, the reality you see, that's why we call ego an illusion, because the reality is that you are never separated from the totality of existence. That never has occurred. It is always the case that we are one with that which exists. It is never the case that we are separate. This experience of separation is purely a mental phenomenon. It's like a person who's sitting in a chair or lying in the bed, falls asleep. And in the sleep, they begin to dream that they're somewhere in Paris and they're being chased by thugs and they're about to be robbed. They undergo all kinds of terror. And in their dream, they just are wishing and praying that they could go home morning they wake up and find they're in the bed all the time. They were never in impact. So it's all in the mind. And it exists in the mind fundamentally because there is ignorance. And as long as we are ignorant of our fundamental oneness, then we have this experience of ego, this experience of suffering. But this ego, this experience that you call me, and this me, the history, your personal history, that thing that has been perpetuated through a fixed period of time that had a beginning, will definitely come through. That thing that you think you are, that me, the contents of your historical experiences of ego, is what the Buddha called skanda. It's like one of the 5 peaks of nothing. It's unbelievable. It does not exist. That's why Jesus says somewhere, take no thought for thyself. He refers to it as himself because that's what we call ourselves. Right? To take no thought for thyself, what you should eat, what you should wear. Don't even worry about that. Why? Because this ego is not ultimately substantial. But that is not a kind of conclusion that you can reach simply sitting in your armchair. Right? That has to be the result of your going inside. Hence the need of understanding. And that is the hardest thing, because that is the part that doesn't want to die. When the mystics and saints talk about you have to kill this ego, you have to cut your own head off, so to speak. That ego is the only barrier between you and the experience of your reality. What they are trying to indicate to us is that we have to somehow, through a effort of deep understanding, understand this one very thing, that thing that you are calling me is an illusion. That thing that stands behind the ego has had many egos. Where is your ego? The ego you were in your last lifetime is very different from the ego you are now. You had an ego, you had a body. This is not the first time you had a body and the experiences that go with that. It is not the first time you had parents and all of that other stuff. I mean, this has happened, billions of times. So egos come, egos go. But we're like that sky, which clouds they rise and they move. But the sky remains. The clouds just drift across this expanse. So is it with the expanse of our consciousness. And it's your consciousness that is experiencing this ego. And the ego comes. And our effort is to keep it the same. Even just speaking in ordinary psychological terms, we try to not change. Have you ever noticed that? You're doing your best not to change. And look at the absurdity of it on the face. Everything that you made of will change. But we go on clinging to this image that we have of ourselves that is passé, that is historical, that is no longer the case. Right? And we refuse even psychologically to change. But change is the order of truth. You are not the same person you were. You're not even the same ego you were 10 years ago. But you try to cling to it. All right? Now, the realities of your life mandates that you make certain adaptations, certain change, but you can't change because you still are clinging to the me that existed 10 years ago. I don't do these kind of things. I never say this. I never let a person do this to me. Now that's old you. The new you is going to have to adapt. And then you come into conflict. You see? Because you're trying to carry forward and maintain and perpetuate a ego itself that is no longer appropriate for the reality of the situation and circumstance. So the ideal in spirituality, you see, and I don't even know if we can talk intelligently about the state of egolessness, but if I could say anything, then this state of egolessness is really the capacity to be anything. You're no longer limited. You see, you can move in any dimension of your being. You see.
And be aware.
Of course. Not only be aware, but you have freedom. So you have no freedom to be other than what you are. You don't even want to be anything other than what you are. That is what you clinging to. And you think that, oh, if I stop being the historical Bajira, the psychological Bajira, this me thing, oh, then what's going to happen? Great fear. But there are many situations in life for which the identity that you're clinging to is totally inappropriate. It won't work. You see? And so, in a state of egolessness, you just flew. That's what it means when a thing is in a state of potentia. It means that you can become any form. You can take any form. That is one of the characteristics of God, is that God can take any form. It's not limited, not locked, not trapped, not attached. That we call God can be a tree, can be a rock, a stick, a human being, a bird, a microbe. It can take any form. It has that freedom. And that is also our intrinsic ability, is to be anything. But our problem in ego is that we can only be this little ego. And hence we miss the breath.
And I guess I was just trying to focus as far as
Yes.
words, you know,
Yes,
and it's hard.
It's hard to articulate. It's very difficult to articulate. One of the things that happen in meditation, and that is always the frightening thing in meditation, is that when one is able to separate oneself from one's continuous identification with these complexes in the mind that serve as the basis of generating our sense of identity, one is overwhelmed with a deep sense of fear. Because you feel like you're about to die. And in some sense, you're right. That ego, that me, is dying. And it becomes a very frightening experience. A very frightening experience. The mystics say that either you can die willingly and while living, or then you just die the death of a cow. But you're going to die one way or the other. Slow and steady. This me will come to an end. It is something temporary, temporary, transient. But you're not even being in the life. But look how much of your sense of who you are is restricted to your being a female. And where is the ego of your firebird that you need? It is survive. And this
Bhagwan, you don't think you can kind of bring some of that stuff up from I know what it is, you know, to keep serious. I want to be just real nice, but kids are playing and stuff. So,
yes.
to me, you like to bring some of that stuff from another
You
way.
bring some scars, certain tendencies, certain predispositions, certain impulses at the level of the mind and things of that nature. But these are just the raw material out of which your persona is made, right? So you sort of bring some of those things. That is true, right? You also bring in a thing they call karma, the consequences of your previous action. That's an occasion, right?
Yeah.
So you bring the results. But you may be a different ego this time. In the previous birth, now you slit so many people's throats, you was a bad person, right? And since there's never enough time within the expanse of a single lifetime to undergo the consequences of all one action, some of those consequences have to roll over into the new life, right? Where you have now this gentle persona, gentle person, one harmless as a fly, and people are just tearing you up. Everything is going wrong. So much suffering is occurring in you, and you're trying to figure out why is all this suffering? I'm such a nice person. Why I'm catching so much hell? Well, what rolled over was the consequences that occurred in that lifetime when you was not a nice person. You see? But because you only know this me, this persona of this lifetime, you base your whole interpretation of the events of your life on this one little persona experience. But what about the consequences rolling over into this life from all your prior life where you've done so much comfort? Right? And when one is able in meditation to see that, you see, then you, out of that understanding, adapt very differently to the things that are going on in your life now. What was previously taken as being wrong, unfair of life, you see, it's absolutely reversed. And then the way you react then becomes very different. You are far more willing to go through the trials and tribulations. There's a deeper understanding. There's no suffering that you're going through. I'm reminded of a story of one of the great mystics you see, who, in spite of being a great mystic, was born in his present life blind. And after practicing his yoga, his meditation, he was able to go back deeper into the layers of his being. And like when one is on an archaeological exploration, you see, all of the deposit of your prior being is there too. And so you can see. The Akashic record, they call it, you see. So you can see into your past life. You see what all of these things. And so this blind mystic went in to investigate because he didn't understand, you see. Why this blindness? Because that's a great suffering. You see, when you're blind, 83% of life escapes you. 83% of conscious experience comes through the eyes. Because 83% of our attention flows through. So it's a tremendous form of bad karma to be born blind. In fact, many old mystics, yogis, would not even initiate a person. They would not even be initiated. Their karma is so heavy. You see, initiation involves very often the taking of someone's karma. That's another story. But in any case, so this mystic investigated layer after layer of his being, lifetime after lifetime prior to this lifetime. And in all of these lifetimes, he could find no action. He saw all of the different personas, all the different egos, all the different forms, all of the different lives he led. He saw all of the actions he did and all of the consequences that must follow those actions. And he could see nothing in there that would warrant his present birth being born blind. And so he went to his guru and he shared all of this with the guru. And he lamented to the guru how, you know, there seems to be nothing in his past that he to warn him. And so the guru told him to sit again in meditation. And the guru helped guide him, you know, so that his concentration is better, etc. And he went back to his 102nd birth, and in that birth he found himself as a little boy playing outside with a twig, and he put out the eye of a grasshopper. And 102 births later, he had to be born. Sweet man that he was, but he has to. And this is the law of karma.
I mean, that's when he only put out the eye of a grasshopper?
That's the law of karma. You will reap what you sow. You must experience the outcome. You hurt, you shall be hurt. The law.
See, that's what I often wonder about.
You wonder about that? That explains why you can't dance, right?
You come back as that dog. You know, I often wonder what guarantee that you're gonna have to come back as a human in the first place. You know?
Only if you behave as if you in the first place.
So that also stands for like...
Act like a dog, get a dog form, which is more appropriate.
Right. I often thought about that. So even with like, you know, and I know this is a whole other topic, like, so even with disabled people who, sometimes they have people who come in, you know, their limbs are disfigured.
All of this. You see, that's one thing that you realize, in addition to the realization that the nature of this ego is such that the form that it takes will change. It will age, it will become ill, it will decay. You understand? That all of the relationships that are developed in relationships to the physical body is impermanent, transient. Either you will die or they will die, but separation is inevitable. So
we're swatting flies and
Yeah.
and stepping on
Yeah,
bugs
right.
and oh god.
I'm thinking the same thing. I'm thinking the same thing.
You see, because even as you breathe, what's the say of stepping on bugs? As you breathe, billions of microbes are in the air. Billions of them. Life, this whole universe is made of life. There's nothing that in the universe that you can taste, see, touch, smell, feel, experience that doesn't exist.
So we can't escape it.
I mean, Bhagwan, if you swat fly, I mean, you might come back as a fly, somebody swat you.
You might, unless there was a fly that had squatted you, a human being had squatted you when you were a fly. It may be just